Hey everybody, welcome back to It's a Metal Thing. Today, rear suspension on the 61 Falcon gasser. Let's get started. All right, today we get a start on the rear suspension. Got the rear end narrowed up where I want it. I think it looks good. I like where it sits. So I never built a rear suspension before. I was thinking about all kinds of different, what the spring's gonna be, how's that gonna work, and a buddy of mine's got that Caltrax Calvert monoleaf system on his 62 Nova. I think it's 62. Anyway, it's real similar to that, so I started sniffing around on Calvert website, and they make springs for the Falcon, so they say. They fit the Falcon, except they're 2.5 inches wide instead of 2 inches wide, and they sit an inch higher than stock ride height. But that gives me a place to start. So what I got going on is I bought some 2.5 by quarter flat bar that I'm gonna roll. So I got the dimensions from, it's 50 inches from eye to eye, and it's 6.5 inches tall. Now, he said that, I told him what I was doing. I told him building a gasser doesn't really have to fit, and I just trying to find a spring that's gonna work. And I asked him about how much it would squish with the weight. He said about 1 inch, but he also said it rides 1 inch higher than stock because the spring is stiffer. So I'm going with 6.5. So that's gonna compensate for the inch, right? Both inch because the springs are stiffer and drop 1 inch because the suspension squish. But so the plan is to end the flat bar because it's going to be the center of eyelet is where all the dimensions are going to be based off of. So this is the center of the eyelet. So I'm going to the flat bar from here, obviously over to here, coming down, touching at 6.5. The pin, the rear end pin is located at 22 inches from the front. So I'm going to, once I get that flat bar rolled, I'm going to drill a 3/8 hole. I have, this is my spring perch that I bought. It's heavy duty. I think it's for off-road use. It has 3 locations. I don't think that'll ever come into play. And I have the Afco slider that I'm gonna run. So the plan is to run the spring on top of the rear end if I can. I don't, because it sits so high, I don't want a big arc in the spring, just for lateral movement, right? The bigger the arc, the more leverage you have. The flatter the spring, the less situation you're gonna get. So going down the freeway, or if it gets sketchy at the drag, and you maybe get a little out of the way and it gets a little sketchy, it won't be all noodle-roni back there. So the plan is to go on top. I don't know anything about suspensions. I don't know if that's gonna affect how it works as far as launching and all the stuff that goes on with the center and separation and all that stuff. I've been watching videos and trying to figure it out as I go. The front leaves, or the front ladder bars are gonna be unique too, in that I'm gonna run a shackle on the front. I'm not gonna run a slider on the spring. I'm gonna run a shackle on the front of the ladder bar so it can move back and forth. I thought about running the Caltrax, but I want the vintage look of those big giant 8-foot long ladder bars underneath there. And that's another thing I have to think about too. All the old school ones, they had square tube, and I just think they look like ass, but that's kind of what they ran. And this is coming from a guy that's running a freaking Coyote. So there's no rhyme or reason. I want it to look like an old gasser driving down the road. When you look at it and you see it in a parking lot or something, I want it to look like it's old. I want it to look like an old gasser. But when you start looking at it, you get up close and you can see that it's not just an old gasser. So that's the plan. So anyway, rambling on here. I'm gonna roll this and drill a hole and get underneath there and see how it goes. Rolled, flat bar rolled. I made it long because I wasn't sure how long length it was gonna be. And math is hard, so just run it along. So I'm gonna cut this here, and then have a mark here at 22. I'm going to 7/16 bolt. I'm gonna center it up here and drill a 1/2 inch hole. Bolt that underneath there and crawl underneath the car and roll around in there and see if that's gonna even be close. So that's next. All right, got it drilled and screwed in. I'm gonna try to slide underneath there. I haven't tried it yet. We're gonna find out together. I got this hokey set up on my camera. See if it goes. Hoping. All right, so right here, for some reason, my camera decided to go into slow-mo all by itself. Time-lapse. Time-lapse? I don't remember if it was slow motion or time-lapse. Oh, no, it was slow motion. So anyway, I was able to, with the editing software I have, I was able to like speed it way up, like 800% or something, and got it close to the speed that it needs to be, so you could see what I'm doing here. So anyway, I slip it underneath there, put the saddle on the rear end, was kind of seeing where it landed in the front, and I was able to scooch it over, and it was landing in a good spot in the front. And if you can see up in the upper right there, it's really close to where the original spring landed as far as the shackle and stuff goes. So that let me know that that spring, that arc that the spring was going to come would work out. You can see right there, it's really close to the shackle, and it's landing on the flat spot on the frame, way lower than the original. Okay, today I'm putting the springs up underneath this thing. But a good spot to start. So I was talking to the guy at Calvert. Go for it. He said you can expect a 1-inch compression on the spring. I'm going to raise the rear end with the jacker 1 inch. I'm going to put my sliders on. I'm going to put my spring perches on. I have the original U-bolts and the mounting mechanism. I'm going to put all that stuff on there, get them up underneath there, bolt it down, and kind of see where I'm at with the spring. And if I have room, I should have room. It should work, but I'm not 100% sure. So I'm gonna get that underneath there. I'm not worried about pinion angle yet, none of that stuff. First things first, see where I'm at with the springs, the clearance to the chassis, what I can do as far as mounting goes. When I figure out how it's all gonna work, and if it's gonna work, then I'm going to worry about getting it all squared up, leveled up, plumbed up, lasered, ready to go. So first things first, get these springs underneath there. I'm gonna do that now. All right, pretty happy with that actually. With that little bit of a gap here, this ends up almost exactly where the original shackle was. If I move this, if I get that parallel, it's pretty close. So probably what I'm going to do here is I'll probably, let's see if I can get this to perch up here. I'm going to cut this tube here off. I'll go and I'll box it in up forward so I have a flat surface here to mount to. I'll probably mount a 1/4-inch plate to the bottom of this whole thing. Once I cut this tube here, I can make one flat surface for this to land in, and it'll be stout. That's not going to go anywhere. Now, obviously, the front spring mount is way lower than original. You can see where it was, so the center of that hole. So I'm probably a good couple inches at least lower. I don't know what that does for the separation and center line and anti-squat, but my theory is, and I don't know if it's right or not, this being more in line will be better to push the car forward as far as transferring the drive to the chassis to move it forward. If it was higher, you're going to end up with a little twist out of the cow tracks, takes care of all that, and blah, 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 blah. But if it's more straight like this, I think it's going to push better. I don't know what it's going to do for anti-squat or any of that other stuff, but I think I'm going to run that. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'll probably go ahead and cut the tube. I'll make a flat surface there with a piece of 1/4-inch plate. You know, it's big enough to cover that whole area, just to box that whole thing in. Because there's in front of that spring, if you can see it, there's that torque plate there, that torque box. So I can just tie all that together, it's just gonna be a whole lot better. It'll be a nice rigid mount that I can still move around. So probably what I'll do back here then, I'm not sure where this is gonna land as far as in and out yet, I haven't figured that out. I'll build something off of here to mount this to, up in here. I'm not sure if I'm gonna bolt it on. I know some people bolt them on. I might make a plate in there so I can maybe make it a little bit adjustable or something. I haven't decided on that yet. But so good. All right, so I don't have to really get everything squared up and centered up, but first I gotta make provisions for these to bolt to. So I'm gonna do that next. I'm gonna cut these out, put a piece of flat plate on there, and kind of, I guess I can weld it all up and get it all flat and smooth and happy for a place for this front spring perch to land. So probably gonna do that next. All right, so moving to the front here, I'm realizing now that I can, it's lining up with the inside of or the outside of this frame rail. So I can plumb off of this hole and get this where it belongs. I can move this forward, move it forward and get it plumbed back where it belongs. And that way it'll make it a lot easier to make sure everything all square and straight. So I'll use this, I'll just come down here. So the plan is to cut this piece out. This is a secondary piece in here. The center section here is concave a little bit for the bushing. And this is raised here. It's a piece of 1/8 inch steel that's in here. I don't want to weld to this. It's going to be hard to get it flat and straight. So I'm going to just cut this out. It comes from here all the way to here. I'll just cut this out as cleanly as I can. And I should be able to just put a big piece of, I don't know, 3 inch wide or whatever plate I need and drill the hole and just come plumb off of there. And then I can set my height and weld that on there. And then on this side here, so this line here, I just took a piece of flat material and I brought it up here, and that's this height here for this thing here. So I'll cut this tube at this height here. I'll plate from this edge here all the way out to here, and that'll give me a place to put my other tab for the other side. So it'll be pretty clean and pretty easy, and it should be pretty stout and look good. So that's what I'm gonna do next. I'm gonna cut this out and cut that off, and I'll come back after that. All right, got both sides cut out. I'm going to measure from this point here back to here, and then the width. I'm gonna cut a 1/4 inch piece of plate to go in there. Before I put that in or tack it in, I'm not gonna weld anything yet. I'm just gonna tack it in, but I am gonna weld this piece in here on both of these. Both sides are gonna bead down that. And then put that up there and see how flat I am. Paper chips or whatever, potato chips or whatever. Get it flat, sitting on there, and then get a level, make sure they're both the same. Although this surface here isn't gonna be that important. I'm going off of the original hole. Everything's gonna be based off of this hole. So I'm actually, when I make this plate, I'm gonna include this hole. I'm gonna put the rear end, all the springs back on. I'm gonna put it where it needs to be so I can get a idea of where that spring is gonna land in here. I wanna move the rear end forward as far as I can. I'm gonna crowd this front edge here a little bit. Leave a little bit of room for a tire change. These are 28 inch are supposed to be. These are Talworks tires. They're 2 different diameters. So that's a good thing. Anyway, let's burn these off and then get some real tires. But yeah, so get some plate in here and see where I'm at, and then put the springs on this thing. Okay, I got it all ground up. Definitely gonna have to fill this. This is gonna look like ass with half a hole. But I got this plate to fit on here. Oh, let's see what I can do here. Got this plate to sit on here flat, and it's level. So I'm gonna tack this on here, but before I do that, I'm gonna weld this nut on. This is the original mount hole for the spring. So I'm gonna use this to help me jig this thing up. So I'm gonna weld this nut on here, because once I box this in, I'll be able to get to it. And then I'll be able to bolt a plate on this side and figure out what I need to do. It's just gonna help me for mock-up purposes. I can also measure off of this to make sure that the holes are the same side to side, and do any changes that I want to as far as the spring moving forward or back in relationship to that hole. But everything was based off this hole, heights and distance forward to back, so that they're both the same on both sides. So I'm doing that next. All right, kind of like that. The frame is just a sheet metal, welded or tacked in, and it's not square. It's tapers out at the top, so it kicks this at an angle. So I'll have to adjust that. I'll probably put a brake right here and bend this plumb. Right now I'm going to just throw the springs on and clamp everything and just see if this is even the right width, just to even start with. So I'm gonna throw the springs on the rear end and get everything kind of loosely put together and slide it in here and see where I'm at, and see if this is even narrow enough. If not, I can not worry about this and just build off of this. this will be solid enough to put 2 tabs on and make the mount. So, I mean, this will be better, but you know, it is what it is. So we'll see. Okay, springs are in, just snugged up, measured around. They're pretty squared, straight. What I'm gonna do now though is I'm gonna set this point here. So whatever I do on that side, I'm gonna do on this side over here. It's all based off of the original mounting hole for the front of this stock spring. I think I'm gonna move it forward, and then that'll end up being the height. I got a 1/4-inch spacer between the bushing, or the spring, and the top 1/4-inch plate piece. And then there's a little bit of meat on the bottom side of the washer there for the bushing. So it's about perfect there. So I'm gonna mark that one, and then take them off and drill them. So I'm gonna drill them both the same based off of the mounting bolt that is right out here. Oh, there we go, dark, too dark. So anyway, and then I have to put a bend in these. The frame rail isn't straight. You know, it's just a sheet metal frame rail, and it kind of kicks out a little bit. So when I marked a line on the back here, I'm gonna straighten those out. Then once I get that set, then I'll know that everything is straight and parallel and square based on the original mounting point. And then I can just scooch it around and move it around and get everything happening in the back. So I'm gonna do that next. All right, working on the front mounts for the springs. So I cut these squares, you saw that. This is bolted to the original location. I put a little bend in them because the frame rail isn't straight or plumb on the side because it's got just a piece of sheet metal. So what's gonna happen is this will end up like that, so that bottom piece there where the spring mounts is square with the world, and this follows the taper in the frame rail. I haven't fit this one yet, but close. So this is the finished product for the passenger side. Same thing, has the kink in it. So it's gonna hang, it'll hang like this, right? So the frame rail is kind of kicked a little bit. So when this will be plumb when this is bolted on. So bolted on, and I made this tab here. It's gonna go on the other side. So it'll mount like that, basically. There's a 1/4 this is gonna mount to. You'll see that later. So this is done. I'm gonna put it underneath there. I'm gonna clamp everything in, see how it goes, and then I'll work on this one. But I just wanna see if this design is gonna work and if I have to change this at all. So I'm gonna do that next. So something like that. So all that plate will get welded in, and then this plate here will be welded. That thing ain't going anywhere. This plate, I need to flatten it some more. It's not flat enough. I'm gonna have to heat it and bend it, because now that I cut this, angle on it, it's not gonna be strong enough to, if I just pressed on it, that would just bend weird, especially with that hole in it. So take that off and straighten it out. It's not nearly as kinked as I thought it was, but yeah, happy with that. So I'm going to flatten that out, get this all squared away. I took a couple of shims that I had left over from my crushed leaf eliminator kit and put them in there so that when it's all welded up, there'll be a little bit of a clearance there. Not much, but you don't want it loose and sloppy. So yeah, I'm going to just fine tune this stuff, get it all in, and then after that, we'll have to just square up the rear part, make sure everything's all square and straight, and then I can tack these on, because even this will still move a little bit. So I don't know if everything's square in the back. So I just want to make sure everything's squared up before I tack these in. But once they're locked in, then it should go pretty quick from there. All right, so as I've been working on this rear end, trying to get everything all set up, and all I was really doing was just taking a straight edge from that tire and then measuring over to the body line there to kind of center up the rear end. And then when I did that, and center up the springs and everything, the rear end's off. I can't figure out what's going on. Come to find out, the tires. So I bought these tires, they're Calvert retreads. I bought these a couple years ago. Before I really knew kind of what I was gonna do. I like the look and everything, and they're reasonably priced. The problem is, I bought a pair, 28, they're actually 28 and a half. and I went to mount them, and the bead broke on one of them. I called and asked him about it, and he goes, well, you did it wrong. And I said, well, you know, it's a used carcass. I don't know what that bead's been through, and you don't know either. So he went ahead and sent me another one at a discounted price. I didn't think much of it. So time goes by, and I'm working on, I'm getting my rear end in, I'm getting the car all leveled up, and the gap between the tire and the fender well is different. And the car's level, I'm thinking, what is going on? Checking my air pressure and everything. Well, I actually measured the tire, and they're different sizes. They're, you know, so they're retread and different carcass, probably different brand. Anyway, can't run that, especially since I got the posi so tight on that rear end. I mean, it'd be like going in a circle. So there you go. Got me some M&H cheater slicks. So today, I'm taking these wheels off, gonna take them down, get them swapped out, get them mounted up, aired up, balanced up, and then I'm gonna get it back on here, and then getting this rear end right where it belongs. So that's next. All right, new tires on. A little bit different dilemma now. I'm going to, I don't know, the tire closer, I think. I don't know. It's all tacked in there. I can move it forward a little bit more, but it might be all right. Another issue I'm having. Oh, so I had to lower the car quite a bit to get it down to get the gap that I want. This side, I couldn't figure out what is going on, man. What is going on? How come there's a gap on where my wheel's touching? So I have to unbolt that wheel, get everything leveled up, squared up. The front is really high now, not really high, but it's higher. So I can lower the front, which is a good thing. It was getting a little freakish. I mean, it is a street freak, but. So yeah, I'm going to take that wheel off. So like I said earlier, I need an inch. It's gonna be an inch drop. So I just want to see where it was gonna be, an inch and a half, because that's what I want for my tire gap. 1 inch of movement and suspension, give me a ½ inch of love. So I'm gonna get that in leveled up, then I'm gonna raise everything up an inch for the squat. So once I get that, everything's all centered up, I'm gonna tack in the back perches, and then I'll add some weight to the back and kind of see what's gonna happen, you know, try to figure out fuel and, you know, glass and all that stuff. I'll add some extra weight in there so I can get it to sit flat. But first things first, get that wheel off the other side, and then I'm gonna level the chassis front to back. I wasn't worried about it before because it didn't seem like it was that big of a difference, but it's pretty significant now. So I'm gonna do that next. Okay, this is ride height. I had to take the wheels off of the casters because I couldn't get it low enough. These tires are a little bit smaller, quite a bit smaller than the Tau City ones that I had, just because they're square like that. These have a little bit of a radius. I allowed myself 1.5 inch gap. It's just there. And then the same over here, 1.5 inches. Right there. I leveled the rear end. The floor wasn't flat. I had to put a piece of 1/4 inch plate underneath there. Leveled the rear end. It's all, the spring distance is the same on both sides. This worked out 39, same as the front, just by pure luck. I'm just inside those frame rails there. I'll be able to attach that frame rail and then do something across the floor here. So now, this is ride height. What I'm gonna have to do is raise the car up 1 inch, because according to Calvert, these springs will drop 1 inch after you install them and with the weight of the car and everything. So the plan is to raise the car 1 inch, re-level it. The rear end is level. I'm happy with this. This worked out. I am gonna have to make these bolt onto the final mounting plate because I won't be able to get that bolt out if I ever wanna take the springs off. So I'm going to drill and tap a 3/8 plate that this will mount to. I have to get the angle right to the front mount and just kind of figure everything out. So that's what's next. I'm going to jack the car up 1 inch, see where I'm at on the angle. I'll cut a wedge or make a wedge, probably out of some tubing that I have. I saw some of that 2.5 by 5. I'm going to cut a piece of 3/8 plate I'm going to drill and tap it so I can bolt the gold mount, the gold slider portion to that, and clamp it in or tack it in and see where I'm at. So 2.5 inch gap, took 2 pieces of 1.25 inch, made a little spacer. Yeah, so I have some 6x1/2, probably overkill, definitely overkill. But as a matter, I'm going to cut a couple of strips, 3 3/8, which will bring it just inside this radius here. It's a little short, but this will give me room for a 1/4 inch gusset on each end and add a little extra strength. I'm going to then mark holes, drill 4 3/8 tap, 4 3/8 bolts in here, and then figure out getting it mounted. So the tricky part, or the weird part, or the fun part is going to be, it's different from one side to the other, the angle and everything. So each gusset is going to have to be handmade, hand fit. You can see this distance here is greater than this distance here. So this is going to change. So all this will be transitional when I go to transition from the frame rail down to the shackle or the slider. So gonna cut a couple strips out of that, drill and tap some holes, reinstall this and start making maybe some templates or something for the gussets. Okay, 1/2 inch plate, 7/16 bolts, overkill, hell yeah. Do I care? Hell no. So I'm done, right? Just finished up, and I'm flipping this over and thinking, what happened here? Why is this offset? Hey, offset, that's a good idea. What I should have done is I should have made this plate long enough to come all the way over and reach the frame, and then I could have tacked on the frame, and then I could have gusseted it after that. Why didn't I do that? I don't know. I'm an idiot. Guess what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna do that. It's all part of the process. So yeah, that's a way better idea. I can set the angle, everything, have it fit this frame rail, tack it in there, and then all it is just gusseting. Why didn't you think of that? Why didn't you tell me that? You probably did. Some of you are yelling at the screen, I'm sure. So, get a start over. All right, mounting plate 2.0 done. Took about 1/2 an hour. And you know, I lucked out. The material that I had left was just enough to cut perfect in the middle. So what's happening here is the frame kicks. These sliders, they are basically 2/3 toward the back. So this might work. What I need to do though is I'm gonna have to cut that or grind that sleeve off so I can get a flat surface. I'm gonna get on the Afco website now and see exactly where they want the slider to land, because it goes, bear with me, little fat man. So they want it toward the front, like 2/3 or so. So I'm gonna get online, I'm gonna figure out where that goes. I'll throw these in, and then hopefully it'll land on the flat, so I don't have to grind a taper in there, and it'll be so much easier. I'll be able to get that angle. They want to go from the front mounting point through that line. I'll be able to get that angle, pull a string, and tack that in, and it'll be so much easier than what I was gonna do. So that's next. All right, got the mounting plate done. It's touching the frame over here. I trimmed down that tube on the back side there where the old shackle came through. I have a string mounted on the front mounting point for the springs. I'm just going to get a plane here. I'm going to just tack on the very back corner over here, kind of lock it in, then I'm gonna move to this side over here. Do basically the same thing, just make sure everything's all level and straight. I'll tack the front and just double check everything. After that, I'll take these off and I'll make the bracing that I need for up the frame rail and across the floor here. So that's next. All right, something like that. So I'll probably box that front end when it comes time for final welding, but I think that's gonna be strong enough when I burn all this in. So I have those other two right there I'm gonna put over here. I'm gonna get those all in and bolted up, and we'll set on the ground and see where we're at. strike one, it's too low where it sits on the slider. You know, it's probably about where it needs to be. Right here, I mean, it's maybe a little back, but it's toward the front. I don't think it's gonna be an issue. The suspension works good, but it's just sitting too low. So before I do anything, probably what I'm gonna do is, because I don't want these like hanging super low, I don't want to change the relationship to the front. I don't know. So what the deal is though is these, they make these springs in 3 different, you know, they got 1 inch lower. This is the stock height. They got 1 inch taller. I'm gonna see what Calvert's exchange policy is. If it's not like too big of a ding, I might go ahead and get the 1 inch over, put those on, see where I'm at. Cause I don't wanna put like a big freaking spacer underneath there to have that thing sit where it needs to sit. So I'm gonna contact them, see what the exchange policy is, see if I can do it without too big of a hit, and go from there. So I'll get back to you. All right, happy days, man. The springs showed up finally. 3 weeks it was. Had to call Jags, tell them to have them drop shipped. I called Calvert and asked them about some of the springs possibly, because these are supposedly on back order. And he goes, we got them. So I had to call Jags and tell them to drop ship them from the manufacturer, which they did. So they finally got here. But just preliminary, looks pretty good. This line here is the original line for that first spring that went off the dimensions, and it looks like I've got a couple inches here, maybe. So that might work out. So I need to cut them apart, obviously. I'm gonna flip these pins over to the other side, and then I'm gonna get them up underneath there. So that's next. All right, spring is bolted in. It's kind of a hassle. My buddy made those. They'll run bushings a little snug. It's hard to get, they don't just slide right in. You gotta like really spend a lot of time. Anyway, look at where that shackle landed, the eyelet. That is way back from the original. And I don't know why they would do that. It's supposed to be basically the same spring, just 1 inch higher, so it would just be more arc. I don't know why the distance between the eyelets would change, but that's way back then from even where it was. It was back too far, you know. Obviously you could like look back a little bit and see that it was already back too, I was gonna have to move it back, but that's a ton. I don't know what you would do if you were putting this in like a stock situation where you had a shackle already built in. That would be messed up. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to unbolt the slider bracket. I'll put a piece of 1 inch tubing. I'll put a couple pieces of 1 inch tubing underneath there. I'll put the saddle on. I'll get it all just setting on its weight, and then I'll be able to at least get an idea. It won't be bolted in, so I can move it forward and back and get an idea where it's going to go. I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to. I know I'm going to have to move that bracket back that it's bolted to. I'll have to add, you know, whatever the distance is that I figured out. I'll put like a 1 inch piece of tube in there and whatever, but I'll have to add to these brackets. Another thing too, now that I'm moving it back, that little cutout that's there, that bracket's probably gonna land in the center of that, so that's gonna change that whole front bracket there. So that's kind of why you tack things together, kids. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm going to unbolt the sliders, lift the car up, do some finagling, and just kind of set everything in place and kind of figure out where the slider is going to land, and you know, far back I'm going to move that mounting bracket. So that's next. All right, spacers in. I had took some 1.5 inch scrap, cut some pieces, tacked them together, put them in there. It's sitting on the spring perch now, and everything's just kind of resting on here. I'm going to have to move that way back. You can see where it originally was, the upper right hand corner of this bracket right here, this thing. Right, that's the front, that's where it was before. Now it's got to go all the way back even more, like probably 3 or 4 inches. I don't know what you would do on that if you already had the shackle. You'd be screwed. Another thing too is it's sitting higher than it's going to be. This is 1.5 inches. This is what I want the gap to be. This is probably another 1.25 inches. What I'm going to do though is get a scale and weigh some stuff. I'll push these down. You know, knock and put a brace in there, set the deck lid on here, put the bumper in the back. I'm gonna run the battery in the back, and maybe a bottle of some sort, maybe. Plus the fuel, I gotta calculate the fuel. I'm gonna go like with 20 gallon. I'm gonna make the tank myself. I don't know if it'll be that big, but I'd rather have it too heavy. So then I'll get all that weight in there and simulate where it's at, and then I'll be able to get a better idea. I'm pretty sure this is gonna be it, honestly. The good thing with the rear end being on top of the spring being on top of the rear end is I can put a spacer in there if I had to, which I don't want to do, but the hope is to get it dead nuts. That's why I'm going through all this calculating and measuring in cubic feet and gallons per minute. Anyway, so that's what I'm gonna do next. I'm gonna load this thing up and see where we're at. Okay, got the weight in it. I got some junk in the trunk. Got a bunch of steel in here. It's right around 220 pounds. So I was kind of just doing some rough guesstimate. 120 for the gas, 50 for the battery. Nitrous ball is 25. Bumper was 20. Is it being 215? I got 220, 225 in there. So right now it has 2 inches of travel, which is ½ inch more than I want. So it's gonna drop though, because I'm moving the weight obviously from this point up to this point, right? Engine and transmission. I don't know how much it's gonna add. I'm only adding seats in there. I mean, there's really not gonna be that much more weight. I'm gonna try to keep as much weight as I can, but so I have 2 inches. I can drop another ½ inch. If I have to, I can shim it. I can put a spacer between the rear end and the spring. I don't want to do that. I'm just guessing here. I'm hoping that my halfway calculations are right. I don't want it sitting too high. That's the thing. I don't want it sitting up too high, and if it is too high, then it's a lot more work to get it where I want them to cut stuff and do all that. But if it's not high enough, I can always shim, which will be easy, but it won't be as quality, I don't think. But anyway, so I'm going to figure out what I got to do in the back, put the slider where it belongs, cut that bracket out of there, figure out where it's going to land exactly. I'm not sure how I'm going to do that yet. Might some clamp some stuff in there. I'll figure it out. Get it where it belongs, and then re-template for the new gussets, and get it tacked in so then this thing can sit on the ground. Finally, it's been sitting up on this freaking frame jig thing for 5 months probably, since I started the frame and redid the rear end and all that. So it'd be nice to get it down and rolling around. So I'm gonna do that next. All right, so this is where I'm gonna run it. I was talking to my buddy. He was just here actually, the guy with the Nova, and he's running the Calvert sliders. These are Afco, but he was saying when he's talking about installing it with the weight on the car, you want the pivot or the slider to be more toward the back. As the spring flattens out, which it is, it gets less movement. So more toward the back. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna run it there now. Just have to figure out how I'm going to. I put a mark up here. I squared off here and came down to this point here. I measured from this edge here to here is 4 inches. So just kind of got to finagle it into place. There's like a 1/4 inch gap between this frame rail and this thing here. So I think I can take this ½ inch plate, bolt it to this, and just barely get a tack on here, kind of where I want it, and then I can work on the pivot and the gussets. So that's next. All right, here's where we ended up. I think the height is good. I think the location, I think we're pretty good on everything. It's just tacked in for now. Later on I'll get it up in the air and get it all welded up. I'll put a gusset in the front here. So yeah, pretty happy with that. So that's where we're gonna run it. Here it is. Got that rear end in. I'm out of breath trying to push this thing. The brakes, man. Those wheelwood brakes, they got a emergency brake on them. You have to adjust them or they won't work. So this side's a little closer over here just because it's sitting odd. But I think that's gonna work. Pretty happy with it. So yeah, I think that's it for this video. If you like the video, subscribe, check me out on Instagram. Next I'm gonna pull down that box. What's in the box? What's in the box?